Welcome to The Fair Fight, a show for you and your fight against corporate power. I'm Max Miller, an antitrust attorney, a corporate skeptic, and a prairie populist. And joining me, former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya, a man who took on corporate power for you, and the president fired him for it.
Every day we're told that the defining fight of our lives is Democrat versus Republican. We're told to worry about the left versus the right. Max and me are a lot more worried about the money at the top versus all of us underneath. And we think that needs to be a fair fight. So we're taking your questions, sharing your stories, and getting you answers about your rights in this economy.
So put on those boxing gloves, tighten up those laces, and enter the arena, because it's time to join the fair fight.
Good morning, everybody. This is Friday, May 22nd, and we are here at the Fair Fight with Alvaro and Max. Today, we are going to talk about the Presidential Slush Fund. And people are talking about how this is illegal. People are talking about how no court has authorized this. Congress hasn't authorized this. Max and I are going to talk about something slightly different, which is what else you can spend $1.776 billion on rather than
you can spend it on a lot, Alvaro.
You can spend it on
many things that help people.
Yes. And
not convicted criminals.
Not people who beat police officers at the Capitol to a pulp, not people who try to overthrow an election. But here's the other thing. When you add on top of the $1.776 billion, the other money we have spent on the boondoggle that is the Iran war, and the other money that we have spent in added gasoline bills at the pump, it adds up to a lot of money. And so today, Max is going to brief us up a little bit on the slush fund, because people are throwing the word around, but I think some of the backstory to how we got here is getting lost. And then we're just going to start doing some math, my friends. We are going to just start letting people know exactly what else we could be spending $1.776 billion on, $29 billion on, $25 billion on. When you add it up, adds to a pretty penny.
I don't know, Alvaro. I'm a little
scared
because I don't think math is my strongest subject.
Math is neither. So
it
is both. It's an exciting episode for a lot of reasons, one of which is you can see us be complete and total idiots on math, but I have this thing called an iPhone with a calculator app.
Well, there's
good.
just like when you a billion here, a billion there. I mean, what's that to the federal government at this point in time?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so folks, first thing that I want to do, because look, we talk about a slush fund, and I feel like people are angry about this, but they don't necessarily know how to talk about it exactly, right? The basic facts of this fund are this. In 2019, Booz Allen, well, actually 2017 was when the contractor started at the IRS, Booz Allen Hamilton, which is an intelligence military contractor, company that has been around since before World War II, provided IRS contractors. Now, their business now is often in the realm of cybersecurity, right? Which is very interesting in this context, since we're talking about fundamentally a data breach. But a gentleman by the name of Charles Littlejohn was a Booz Allen contractor provided to the IRS. He worked there for 2 years. But in August of 2019, and I want everyone to remember who was president in 2019, who was overseeing the IRS. It was a man by the name of Donald Trump. President Donald Trump was overseeing the IRS at this point in time. And Charles Littlejohn violated the cybersecurity of the IRS, got into a vault that he was not supposed to be into, and released not only Trump and the Trump family's tax returns, their companies, but roughly 400,000 different tax returns. Most of them were businesses. I think I saw a statistic that it was about 90% of the tax returns were actually business. Um, and Little John was, under the Biden administration, was charged and convicted for his role in this leak. But after Trump won the election in 2024, in January of 2025, he brought a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS.
It-
The IRS,
What year was this? What year is this when he filed it?
2025.
So
It
it's
was right
against
after.
himself because he is the
Well,
head of the federal government.
I don't know if it was before he took office or just after it, but
Got
yeah,
it.
it's
Okay.
regardless, it's for conduct of the IRS while he was president, right?
Right.
That's
Okay.
because it. And I have a very just fundamental question. I don't understand why the lawsuit is only against the IRS and is not against Booz Allen, whose security, they're the ones that actually hired Little
Yeah.
John.
Yeah.
They're the ones who were supposedly overseeing his, work and his fitness to serve as a contractor for the IRS. So it seems to me that there's some indemnity, that the IRS would have against Booz Allen. Um, but I don't know if you knew this, Alvaro.
What's
Booz
that?
Allen is a huge corporation in America. Lots of money,
I thought they were a mom
lots
and
of
pop
interest,
operation, Max.
lots of.
Mr. Booz and Ms. Allen.
It's
I
it's
thought
it's
I thought
I
they
mean,
were
it sounds
just
like
a
a little
sweet
boutique
couple.
firm, right? Booz Allen, come get your, nice little boutique outfit.
Yeah.
You find it in a little shopping center in like
Yeah.
Greenwich
Yeah.
Village or something like that.
Oh,
Um,
Greenwich Village. I mean, it sounds
th-
fancy. I feel like it seems like a mom and pop accounting shop to me, at least.
but Booz Allen, so far, I mean, they did lose contracts. I'm pretty sure the Biden administration moved forward on getting rid of those contracts because of this breach. Um, but Booz Allen is also a donor.
Hmm. So what does
And
that mean? What does that imply that they were a donor? So,
well,
oh,
they
is that why you think they didn't
I
sue?
look, they gave money to Trump's ballroom. They're part of those initial
Build the
companies
ballroom?
that were going to fund. Now the ones that were being told that $1 billion of taxpayer money has
Yeah.
to be spent on this ballroom for Trump.
Yeah.
Booz Allen was one of the donors to that. So,
Yeah.
but Trump, Trump didn't sue Booz Allen. No.
Yeah.
He sued himself. He
Yeah.
sued his IRS. I mean, granted, the IRS then came under the Biden administration after he left office, but this this lawsuit essentially is Trump suing the government that he oversaw, right? Like
Yeah.
his security breaches at the IRS were what led to his tax returns being released. Now,
Yeah.
all of this, right? There's lots of defenses.
Right.
You and I both worked in government. I'll be
Yeah.
honest, I haven't been on defense side of government very often, but when I
Right.
worked at the Iowa Attorney General's office, I,
Yeah.
was friendly with the attorneys who defended the state against lawsuits against them. There's a lot of defenses that the IRS could, put forward. Not the least of which is, hey, we weren't responsible for this breach. This breach was you got to sue, Little John,
Yeah.
because he's the one who actually it did an intentional breach of our system, and you got to sue the deep pockets of Booz Allen because they're the
Yeah.
ones that oversaw, his hiring and putting him into place.
Yeah.
But no, nothing like that was put forward in this lawsuit against Trump.
Yeah.
Instead, he negotiated a settlement with the IRS, being represented by a guy named Todd Blanche. Now, who's Blanche? Alvaro, have we heard his name before?
Never heard his name
he's
before.
he's now the acting attorney general. So let's just be clear that he has yet to be confirmed by the Senate as the Attorney
Yeah.
General of the United States. You might remember
Right.
that Pam
Yeah.
Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, was our Attorney General,
Yeah.
and she was fired.
Yeah.
There was lots of talk about why she was fired, but very interestingly, she was fired, and then Todd Blanche was put into the acting Attorney General's position and negotiated this settlement. And Todd Blanche used to represent Donald Trump. in a personal capacity. And so Trump's personal lawyer is now the acting attorney general. Trump sues the IRS for negligence that they did under his watch as president. And his personal lawyer is negotiating this settlement with him. And I'll get to what the settlement is in just a second. But I want to talk to you, Alvaro, because, like, look, I don't know DOJ ethics. Like, I haven't reviewed their ethics policies and all of that. But we both know the FTC's ethics. And the idea that, if I had represented like a client and then was like the lead attorney on a case against that former client and negotiated a settlement, I'd be run out of government for a violation of ethics. I'd probably lose my license, right? Because it's an ethical violation in addition to the policies of the agency, just general ethics in the law. The idea that you would, help a former client and serve in any capacity, that could benefit them on the opposite side of the ball.
Yeah.
So I did see that there have been ethics complaints filed against Todd Blanche for doing this, for signing this document, because he should not be in this position. I think it's very telling that nobody else in the agency was involved, by the Department of Justice. But what is the settlement? And this is cute, right? It's $1.776
It's
billion.
freedom.
That's the year of the Declaration of Independence. Can I do a little rant, Alvaro?
Well, we
Because,
got
like,
to get to the money, man. We got to
I
get to the
know we got to
money.
get to
But
the money. We got to get to the money.
okay.
But 1776, I am getting so upset walking around I was just in Memphis, Tennessee. And we should talk about that, by the way, that we were in Memphis last week. That was a wonderful city. Des Moines, Iowa. You walk around, you see people with these patriotic T-shirts on, and they say, "We the people, 1776." And I just got to point out to people that "We the People" was written in 1788 or
I
1787,
thought you were
actually.
going somewhere different with this. I
No,
thought you
no,
were going to say
no.
something so messed up. You're just
It's
annoyed
the I'm annoyed
that's
that
the
people
thing they
don't
don't
know
line
their
up.
own history. They don't know 1776 is the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, that's the language that comes from 1776, not
Yeah,
"we the people." That's the preamble to the Constitution, which
yeah,
comes over a decade later. And
yeah,
it's like, but just not knowing those fundamental parts of our history,
yeah.
right, is part of the reason that we are in this issue.
Well,
So
I
not
will agree
only is
with
there
you that
money, no, oh, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
will agree with you that when people don't know their history, it's easy to hijack it to your
Yeah.
own ends. And it's like freedom fries during the Iraq War. Just like adding 1776 or freedom to something doesn't only makes it patriotic if you don't really understand, what how we created this country, how we built it, how it was won, who it was won against. So I agree with you on that.
And so this fund, the 1776 $1.776 billion fund, is allegedly to be used because they're trying to say it's not, none of the money's going to Trump, right? Oh no, he's just doing this on principle. But it's to compensate people who have been wrongfully prosecuted. And it's nonpartisan, they say. But I'm going to guess that Tish James, the New York Attorney General that Trump went after and couldn't secure an indictment against, I doubt that she's going to get compensation out of this fund for wrongful prosecution. But the fund is only part of it. And this is where, we need to pay attention to what's happening. Um, the IRS did something that's completely unprecedented, and it's not the IRS, it's Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, who did this, um, agreeing to not audit Trump or any of his businesses in perpetuity, and not just his, but his family's. You know, think of all of the money that has been generated by the Trump family since he came down that escalator in 2016. We have all sorts of insider trading dealings, that allegations that are out there. The Trump family buying into companies right before they receive a government contract.
Yeah.
The idea that they can't be audited by the IRS is just an invitation for them to break further laws. Not
Yeah.
just the insider trading, but all sorts of tax avoidance laws. So it's completely a self-dealing, self-interested, deal. I personally would argue that the United States is not bound by it because it's illegal. It was illegal for Todd Blanche to sign it, right? Because of his personal representation of Donald Trump previously, like that this is a fraudulent settlement, not one that was actually backed by the actual facts, the actual law. And so I would say that if we can win, and when I say we, I'm just saying the anti-Trump people, right, can win in November, take back the White House. It seems that this deal could be unwound. Now, I do want to point out, Alvaro, just because I believe facts are important, right? They're trying to cite Blanche and Trump are trying to cite that the Obama administration did something similar to this, which is the Keeps Eagle case. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
I have not.
It stemmed from, racial discrimination lawsuit against the
Okay.
government, and essentially there was a settlement fund that was made, for groups that have been, unfairly targeted by the government, that there was racial discrimination, that they could, apply for the fund and get compensation for it. So, everyone should know that they're out there, but if you read the scholarly work on this, the cases are very different, and not to mention the Keep Siegel case was very much adjudicated through the court system, right? It wasn't something that was, because what Trump did was dismiss his lawsuit. And then they had this settlement. It's not being reviewed by a court, or at least that's what Blanche says. But we'll see if that holds. Mm.
All right. So that is how we got here. That is who the money is going for. Now I'd love for us to focus on who else it could go for, but also add some other figures to these accounts. Because you have right now us moving quickly to not just dole out $1.776 billion to various friends with various grievances who are aligned. You also have a war on. It right now is a war that ostensibly is under a ceasefire, although every couple days or every week or two, people trade fire in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Gulf. You also have everyone in the United States going to the pump, filling up their cars, and paying an extra $30 or $40, depending on their car, how much gasoline it takes, and what gasoline you use. And so I would love to calculate just like a boneheaded boondoggle number that we can then look at and be like, what else could we have for this money? Because, there's a saying, this is why we can't have nice things. I would love to talk about how we could have nice things. We're just not spending on them. And so you've got $1.776 billion of this slush fund. That's going to come from my money, your neighbor's money, everyone else's, his money. We have $29 billion in the minimum estimate of the cost of the Iran war. And by the way, like a range of experts are putting it at 2x, 3x, 4x, even up to $1 trillion when you look at needing to repair the bases that were struck heavily abroad, needing to replace the ordnance, needing to replace the equipment. So this is a utter total bare minimum. And then the Wall Street Journal put the extra dollars we've put in at the pump that have gone to all these oil companies at $45 billion. So you add up 1.776 billion, add up 29 billion. And again, that is a ridiculously conservative estimate from the Pentagon to the $45 billion by the Wall Street Journal. You get, and I could be wrong here, but I think you get $75.776 billion. So let's
Lawyer
talk
math.
about
It's,
that was iPhone app math, but it is still lawyer math because I put the numbers in.
it's
So people will
they,
check it. Now I'm gonna frantically look at it here. That seems about right.
the
That seems
truth.
about
The
right.
truth is, it's probably a heck of a lot more of
Oh no, it's
wasteful
probably
spending.
yes. It's probably 3x, 4x the amount of money. But here's the
Well,
thing I
money
want
isn't
to
real, Alvaro. Money isn't real when
and
it
time
goes
is a
towards
flat
things.
circle. So,
Yeah.
let's just all go to sleep and just put on some good music. But let's say we live in reality and we need to you know, here's the thing is that whenever anyone who cares about regular people, small business owners, comes out with a big idea, the first thing you hear is, "We can't afford it. We can't afford it. It's too expensive. You're gonna raise taxes on people."
Or
And
people are starving,
right,
or
well,
people
what's
are
happening
starving,
right
we can't
now
afford to help them.
what's happening right now is we're just spending the money. We're not raising taxes. We're just spending the money. We're borrowing the money and spending it. So let's dive in with what the money could be used for. And I want to start this by asking you about your children, Max, when they were 2 years old. How were they? What were they like?
Terrors.
Were they?
They were, you know, they were little intelligent, mini Maxes, running around, energetic,
With lots of
bounce
opinions on Henry George?
well, that came later because of,
Okay.
my teaching.
Yes.
I don't think they could identify Henry George. I'm
No,
not
Henry
sure
George. Okay.
we
All right.
haven't
I
we
don't
haven't
know.
gotten there
When
yet.
you said mini Maxes, I was like,
They just know corporations cause a lot of problems in our society.
all right.
Uh,
So there are these like little radicals running around at two, and I will say, yeah, no, same here. The 2-year-old is the perfect combination of intelligence with no super ego, like no control. It's often very little balance. So like they just want stuff. They want it now. You have to watch them. It's not like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. You can leave them with some Legos, while you're in the other room making dinner, washing the dishes, whatever. You really have to watch a 2-year-old. And yet, this country does not provide childcare for 2-year-olds. You, as a parent, need to provide that childcare. And I actually don't have the figures in Iowa, but in Washington, D.C., childcare and in the environs of Washington, D.C., childcare can cost, easily $20,000 a year, $15,000, $25,000 a year per kid. Like that is a very reasonable childcare expense. And so recently we have had an elected official go and try to get childcare for pre-K 2 kids. Now, DC, I think, is pre-K 3, which means that once your kid is 3, they get publicly provided childcare. New York City is moving to pre-K 2, thanks to Mayor Mamdani, thanks to Governor Hochul. And this was one of the coolest things because he was talking about it in the campaign trail, gets in and just cuts this deal with Kathy Hochul, who kind of endorsed him towards the end, but wasn't seen as a natural ally necessarily. And so the beauty of this is we actually have kind of high-low estimates of what childcare costs when the government provides it on short notice. All right. So I'm going to actually do something because we're being conservative here, where let's just take the high figure that Mayor Mamdani's critics are using to criticize this childcare program. And I'm not sure who thinks it's smart to criticize someone trying to take care of 2-year-olds so you can
Rich
actually go
people,
work. Yeah,
rich,
exactly.
immoral people think it's a good idea.
So
That's what.
so what we see from the New York Post, which is no fan, and Mamdani loves the rib 'em, no fan of Mamdani, puts the per child expense at around $36,000. And they say, again, these are the critics, harshest critics of Mamdani, say that in New York it usually costs around $23,000. And so just the slush fund, Max, I
Can
just
we
did
just,
this.
but Alvaro, can we just pause for a minute and
What?
think
Okay.
about that? Like $23,000 to $36,000 to care for a kid over the course of the year. Like, so now think about that falling to the parents.
Right.
And
Right.
and and people don't, people want to talk about the fact that we're having a birth crisis in this
Right.
country. I mean, this is something like Elon Musk wants to
Right.
talk about.
Yeah.
But nobody really ever talks about the cost.
Yeah.
That it's like because childcare is so expensive, that creates a disincentive for people to have kids. But then also, you just think about like communities
Yeah.
that used to exist in the past, rural communities where it would take a village to raise a kid, right? It's like the idea that it would ever be that much is nuts.
Yeah.
We've broken down those bonds of community that would take care of those kids.
And look, there's interesting evidence from countries abroad that have tried to make it super less expensive, and
Yeah.
the birth rates still don't go up. But that's the stage at which I say the basic structure of society isn't suited to having two breadwinners in the family. And what struck me when we had kids is even when you take them to school or even when you start taking them to a daycare, usually the daycares start at like 9:15 and they get
Yep.
out between 2:45 and 3:15. So like the workday is ostensibly 9 to 5, right? So like even on its face, it just doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. You need to have one person working who has a flexible schedule or who can work from home. So like the whole structure of society isn't isn't conducive to having kids. But let's get back to the
Yep.
let's keep our eye on the ball here. So Max, do you know how many
Nah, no,
two-year-olds
let's just go off on
you want to go
tangents.
off?
It's like,
Well, here,
what's
how many beautiful, terrible two-year-olds live in Iowa, Max? Just take a guess.
too many. No, terrible, terrible
So
twos.
take
No,
take take a
I
guess.
got one in next door to me, and my neighbor has
All right, so we have at
starting to
least
enter.
one. How many more
Yeah.
you think are in Iowa?
Well, let's see. We got like 3 million people,
All
so
right, all
I'm
right.
gonna guess like that age. I'm gonna say like 40,000.
Nice. You
All
have
right.
about 37,000 two-year-olds in Iowa. All right.
Lawyer math.
So just the slush fund, Max. Let's just type this out because again, you're dealing with lawyers here. I'm going to do the upper end estimate of Mayor Mamdani's per kid thing, which is 36,000. Now, probably is much lower because we're citing the New York Post, right? Multiply that by 37,000, that costs $1.332 billion. So
For
for
Iowa. So to take
for
care of all the
Iowa, so for Max's friends and family, for our buddies in Iowa who've been on the show, my friends, every single two-year-old in Iowa could have not just childcare, but amazing childcare. Because if it costs $36,000 for the government to provide childcare in New York City, again, it's probably closer to 20,000, 25,000. It doesn't cost exactly that in Iowa. So my strong suspicion is that you could do not just pre-K 2, but pre-K 3 in Iowa. You could probably pay for every 2 and 3-year-old in the state of Iowa to have publicly provided childcare with this slush fund. And
and you
then
still have you still have some left over because you said it was about 1.1 billion, right?
I think when you add in the 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, because there's a similar number of 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
So let's say safe assumption
We don't
Iowa
need
it
to do
costs.
math.
Yeah, I know, right?
We'll
Let's say
just
in
say
Iowa it
about the
costs
slush
around
fund will cover the kids.
24,000 times 37 plus 37 max. That's 74,000. Yes.
Alvaro
Oh my
wanted to
gosh. Oh my
be.
gosh, Max. Look at this
Look at
number.
that.
Look at the number. Look at the number.
That can't be. That's not
That
right.
is the
You did
number.
that. You did
So
that.
I applied a 33% discount to the 36,000. That brings you to 24,000 per kid in Iowa, which I suspect you could probably get good childcare in Iowa for $2,000 a month. All
Yep.
right. Multiply that by $74,000, which is 74,000, which is the number of 2 and 3-year-olds in Iowa. That is how much it costs to provide every single 2 and 3-year-old in Iowa with free childcare.
And
And
can
that is the
we?
exact number of the Donald
It.
J. Trump.
I mean, something makes me think you totally set this up,
I
but
did not set it up. I'm
that was
not that
good.
smart. I am not
That
that
was
smart.
good, man. That is, I'm going to be skeptical here, but something important to remember is that when we talk about paying for people's childcare, right? It's not like the money that they would have spent on childcare just disappears, right? That money gets put towards other things. So it actually helps to grow the economy. So, if that investment is made in providing free childcare for people in the state of Iowa, that's $1.776
Right.
billion dollars that's
Right.
freed up in those families' budgets to
Yep.
go eat at their local restaurant,
Yep.
to buy more groceries, to patronize small businesses in their community. And so that has a multiplier effect,
Yeah.
in the economy. Whereas it's just basically lost, going towards something that is a necessity, which is childcare.
And then here's the other multiplier, which is we've just been talking about the slush fund. Add to it the $29 billion super duper minimum from the Iran war. Add to it the $45 billion at the pump. Max, with the $75.776 billion that has just been dumped into the gutter since February of this year, the end of February of this year. So February to March, March to April. In 3 months, we are either about to dump or dumping $75 billion down the drain. You could cover free childcare for most 2-year-olds in the United States of America. There's probably around 3.7 billion, it's billion, so 3.7 million 2-year-olds, pardon me, in this country. My lawyer math calculations, not to be trusted, but for the purposes of the show, we're going to trust them or use them. You could cover childcare for 2,104,888 beautiful, terrible little 2-year-olds for free, or rather with money we've already spent into the coffers. So that's one. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to making sure those little kids are fed. All right. So let's make sure those little dudes are fed, because the only thing worse than an angry 2-year-old is an angry 2-year-old who hasn't got his snack. And so right now in our K through 12 public schools, we pay roughly $19 billion to do free and reduced price lunches every year. Okay.
Nationwide, that's
Nationwide.
crossing.
Nationwide. It's a good deal.
That's
Nationwide. Because
actually a great deal.
these lunches cost like $2, $3, $4 a pop to provide. And estimates, according to WBUR, wonderful radio station in Boston, is it would cost another $11 billion a year to feed every single kid and teenager in those schools a free lunch. And so add it up. And again, this is our 3-month money down the drain fund of $29 billion for the Iran war, $45 billion in added gasoline expenses, and this brand new $1.776 billion slush fund. That brings you to $75.776 billion. I'm going to call it $77 billion, because I think you could cover free lunch for every kindergartner, first grader, second grader, third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader, ninth grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader in the United States of America for 7 years. You could feed every child in elementary, middle, and high school in this country a healthy lunch for 7 years with the money that we are dumping down the drain over the course of 3 months.
Why
I know
is it
what.
that
What's that?
why is it, Alvaro, that Americans are so unconcerned about spending on death and destruction, but so concerned about helping people? Because it's like, it's amazing to me to see the difference in reaction when, we talk about how much the Iran war is costing on a monthly basis, and people are kind
Yeah,
of like, meh, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Or just like, it's like, well, that's war, that's the military. Um, Yesterday on Twitter, I actually really appreciated seeing somebody, because I don't know if you saw Jeff Bezos um, did an interview where he was like, yeah, well, number one, he was like, raising my taxes isn't going to help people. Raising my taxes isn't going to help that teacher in Brooklyn. He was just
yeah,
saying some ridiculous things. But one of the statements he made was that, um, he could get his CFO, to look at the government budget and find, 3% spending cuts across the board and all that.
yeah,
And it's amazing, because we already tried this Doge thing, right? And it was just a complete and abject failure, right? That it cut
right.
programs that were necessary. There was seemed to be no rhyme or reason to what they were doing, and it was disgusting and inhumane. But so he said this, and somebody called it out and was like, you know what, I can do that too. I can just look at the military budget and cut it. Because people
Yeah,
just seem to not
yeah,
appreciate what percentage of our taxpayer dollars go to funding a military, a standing military that used to, and I remember at the founding of our country, this goes back to like knowing our history. right? The founding fathers warned about the idea of having a standing army.
Hmm.
They
Right.
believe that armies actually, like, should be kind of retained by the states, and that the idea of the federal government holding an, massive military force was an
Yeah.
invitation to tyranny.
Yeah.
And so, but over time, we've come to, post World War II, we basically have decided that this is a necessary expense, this defense spending, or as it's now called, war spending, the Department of War. Um, and yet, when it comes to talking about helping kids, I'm sorry to go on another tangent here, but do you remember when we were in Pine Ridge and
I
we were
do.
talking to
I just
people?
had dinner with RF on Wednesday.
When
Yeah.
what a beautiful man he
Yeah.
is, we just a friend of the show,
Yeah.
RF
Well,
Bowie,
so
who
he is the last grocer of Pine Ridge, South Dakota, who feeds what is now the poorest county in America with the lowest life expectancy in America, even though the people there who are the Ogallala Lakota or the Ogallala Sioux are absolutely extraordinary human beings. And Max and I visited him first, I think, in, was it late 2022 or 20?
yeah,
Yeah, it
it
was
was it
2023,
was
late
2
2023.
I think it was 22. I think it was
Really. And then
December
we
of
visited
22. I think it was
again.
that first year
Yes. And then we
that we
visited
were.
again about a year later,
Yep.
and who over time has become a good friend of Max and myself. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, it's just in conversations that we had with tribal members and with RF and, understanding that government programs for people that are in extreme poverty, right? Like, there's programs to feed kids that the
Yeah.
kids will, like, ration and take home to their parents, right? Because
Right.
that they
Oh, no.
sorry,
Yeah.
I just
I remember.
they
Yeah.
it's disgusting that we start pinching pennies to make people hungry, right? But that will go and kill children in Iran, with not a thought about it.
Yeah. Or Gaza. And I remember that exact same moment you're talking about, Max. We were standing in the dairy aisle, and I think it was President Starr comes out, and other leaders in the Ogallala Lakota Tribal Council were talking to us about how children were going to school and then hoarding food from the free breakfasts and lunches they got because no one at home had any food. And they were hiding food, they were they were feeding their families. And then we heard from uh, a state legislator who said there's kids who run out of food halfway through the month, or they only have the ability to go to the 7-Eleven or whatever gas station convenience store. They don't have a car, they don't have gas money. So they show up at the hospital with ulcers because for 2 weeks of the month, they are drinking soda and eating chips because there's just no gas station doesn't have eggs or milk, right? Or fresh fruits and vegetables. And so this is the immoral just barbarity that we're living in, where kids in this country are hungry and we are spending billions upon billions of dollars in bombs to kill people in other countries. So,
Or incentives for
yeah,
data centers or grants to corporations, which basically just go to their bottom line, to their profit margins.
yeah,
We spend
yeah,
money where it
yeah,
doesn't help people except the very few in
yeah,
this country.
yeah. And I think that it's funny. People think that when you work in federal government, you've got a cushy job when we've lived the fact that it is very much the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, it pays okay, it's a decent salary, but it's not a luxurious salary for the areas in which most federal employees live. One time, and my uncle, when I first got the job at FTC, asked me, "Oh, you travel first class?" And I love the guy, but I had to be like, "Bro, I fly home on the last flight of the night so we can avoid a night in hotel. I am in the middle seat because we just pick whatever airline is cheapest, where I don't necessarily have any status or anything like that. But the flip side of it is the beauty of these jobs is you actually get to meet a whole swath of American society that most people
Yeah.
don't get to meet. And so I think a lot of
Well,
the folks, well, let me say one last thing. I think a
yeah.
lot of the folks who may listen to the show, at least who know me, may live on the coasts and may not be privy to the daily fact that there are kids in this country who are hungry. And that is the backdrop against which all of this is happening that is super easy to forget.
Well, and talking about kids and feeding them, we forget how important this is to education too, right? Because when kids are hungry, they can't learn. And, you know, we do have to have an educated populace, right? It's important for maintaining democracy.
Mm,
It's important for maintaining our economy. I mean, I worry that so many people are just discounting this idea because of AI,
mm,
right? But there still is a need for educated people to actually create more economy in our economy.
yeah,
And when we have kids going hungry, they're much more likely to experience behavioral problems, to be identified as behavioral problems, and then we get what's known as the school to prison pipeline, right? Because they're not getting fed, right? And anyway, I just I worry so much about the just lack of morality in our budget decision making, especially when we see this like blatant corruption of Trump and his slush fund moving forward. So, how do we get food to those kids? Um, I think when you go and visit a place like Pine Ridge,
mm,
you can see, this is an I'm trying to remember the statistics here and I can't, but like in Iowa, right? We are one of the most agricultural states in the country. The economy is so, fully dependent on agriculture. We have some of the richest soil in the world, though it's been completely depleted by corporate chemicals being applied to try to increase yield. But the amount of food that is available for our residents, but is then shipped out of state because it's not actually for human consumption. Maybe it's used for ethanol.
mm,
Maybe it's used for products and manufacturing. It's used for feed for other protein sources. That's if we don't have agriculture, we are going to go hungry. And one of the things that policies over the last few years have really brought to the forefront is that farmers are going bankrupt in rates that we haven't seen since the 1980s farm crisis. So just so everyone knows, there are basically two classes of farmers.
mm,
I would argue. One is like the century farm, the family farm that's been going on for generations. Started in the 1900s, right, and then passed down from one generation to the next. Um, that is a really hard way to make a business run
yeah, yeah,
because essentially they are borrowing at the beginning of each year to pay for their inputs, the seed, pesticides, herbicides, um, all of those costs to get the crop into the ground and raise it for the year. And they don't know what the prices are going to be when they go to sell it at the end of the year. They don't know what weather could happen. It could be intense drought. It could be intense rain. There's all of these different factors that play into, um, whether or not a farm can actually pay off its debt at the end of the year. Because the basic idea is you borrow at the beginning of the year, you pay it off with your yield. You have enough left over that's for your income for the year, right? And then to start, on the next year's crop. But because of this system, farmers go bankrupt at amazing rates. And if you do any kind of a tweak to the system, such as increased fertilizer prices, right? Such as depressed export markets. If you no longer can send it overseas to actually get the reward of that. All of these different factors can affect. And so, with the trade tariffs, with the Iran war, these are shocks to the economic system of farmers that's causing bankruptcies at an alarming rate. So in 2025, we had 315 bankruptcy filings across the country, which was a 46% increase from 2024. So
Wow.
just in a 1 year period, there's a 46% increase, and this year looks to be on the same trend, going up even higher.
Wow.
So there are people that are writing about this, and a stat that sticks out to me is that if we just spent $10 billion to help out struggling farms in this country, like that would save us over $30 billion in rural bank failures. And well,
Say that
this is
again. Say
actually
that one
so.
more time.
So
Yeah.
it's like 10 billion. So the
Yeah.
economic multiplier here, right? ten
Yeah.
billion dollars on farmers. This is like if Congress were to pass
Yeah.
some kind of a relief
Right.
system, for farmers, because it's when you think about it, when a farm goes bankrupt, right? It's not just the farm that is affected;
Right.
it's also the bank that they borrowed from, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not necessarily going to recoup all that they're in on
Right.
that operation, right? And so there's losses there. So when farms go bankrupt, the banks that service them also
Yeah.
go bankrupt.
Yeah.
One economic report here said that it was 10 billion, 10 billion on farmers will save us over $30 billion in rural bank failures and local business closures, right? So you have that
Hmm.
multiplier that we could do it. But if we just spent that $10 billion, think of the impact for those family farms,
Yeah.
right? Now, I am worried that, because this is kind of those things like you give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish, right? Like we essentially have an unsustainable economic system for farmers.
Yeah.
And what has been happening slowly but surely over time is that as family farms go bankrupt, they get bought up by corporations that are actually trying to own, as much
Right.
land as they possibly can.
Yeah.
um, so until we change some systematic failures, I would say the input concentration, fertilizers, pesticides, the seed companies. By the way, did you see that Trump DOJ just settled with Bayer on? They had a it's similar to the FTC's pesticide case. It was like the loyalty discounting program
Mm.
for the seeds. And it's a huge investigation that my understanding is that the DOJ attorneys were very excited about, as a, kind of market conspiracy of many different
Hmm.
participants in it, but also individual conduct. And
Yeah.
anyway, they got a slap on the wrist yesterday from DOJ. Bayer was released of their investigation. So farmers are getting hit coming, and then they're getting hit going when they go to sell it too, because there's only a few buyers to buy their product. And
Yeah.
until we have some fundamental change to that system, bankruptcies are going to continue to occur.
Yeah.
But I would propose, I'll put this out there. I've said it on Twitter, and I think we have extensive foreign ownership of farmland, which I hope Americans realize is something that is alarming and that
Yeah.
we should actually be challenging. And we have extensive large corporate ownership of farmland. And it's at a point right now where I think that we need to have a new Homestead Act, nationalize that land,
Hmm.
take it back from
Hmm.
corporate ownership, pay them, the fair rate for it, take it back from foreign ownership, take that pot of land. And like we did in the 19th century, where we created a whole middle class through agriculture, have a new
Hmm.
Homestead Act where
Hmm.
people who want to farm, people who actually want to, get into this business, can do so. And I think what you'd find is that younger generations want to do things like organic farming, where they
Hmm.
cut out that whole pesticide industrialized, farming that's destroying the soil and destroying the environment. Anyway, well, I'll stop at that. That's if you talk about $10 billion being spent to help
Right.
these failing farms, the communities that those farms exist in stand to benefit tremendously.
You could do that 3 times over with the $29 billion bare minimum estimate of the Iran war.
Yeah.
So, here's my last, I don't know if this is wish list or, don't get list item, which is healthcare. So, you were just talking about farmers. I think one of the most surprising moments for me visiting with farmers this year, was not talking to our old friend Josh Mansky, wasn't talking to Aaron Lehman,
Friend of the show.
friend of the show, 2 Iowa corn and soybean farmers. It was actually up in Minnesota with our friend Justin Stoffernan. And I was giving a talk to the Minnesota Farmers Union at their annual convention. And I love going to these things. I wish I could have stayed longer, because you just get to catch up with people, ask them, hey, what's good right now? What's bad? What's worrying you? What are you excited about? And this was right around the time when, I guess it was last year. I'm obviously bad with memory and dates and numbers. I think it was last year. It was shortly after the Chinese had decided to cancel all of their soybean orders.
Yeah.
And so I got there and I was completely confident, Max, that, yeah, it was like October, November, I think.
Yep.
I was completely confident that I would go there and just find a bunch of farmers who are basically only thinking all the time about where on earth am I going to sell these soybeans? Because there's only so much storage space. It costs money to store, sometimes, and I forget it, but they explained to me the dynamics of how long you can store it for, you can store the soybeans for. It is not like you can just put them in a silo and forget about them for 10 years until you find a great market. So I remember standing there with the president of the Minnesota Farmers Union and one or two other farmers. And I made sure to ask him, I said, hey, I got to ask you, what is the number one issue that your guys are worried about, that your people are worried about? What's the number one issue right now? And Max, I was 1,000% confident it was going to be finding a market for our soybeans. But no, the first words out of his mouth were healthcare subsidies, healthcare. We have dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds of farmers across the state who are going to go under because they cannot afford healthcare. And I think this is a good moment to explain to people that it is the very rare farmer who exclusively farms for a living. It might be the guy or the woman who has managed to amass a massive property, but most farmers who own what you would consider a reasonable amount of land have to have other jobs. And what is most common is the spouse has a job that provides the health insurance, right? So has a W-2 job that comes with health insurance. And that is a huge part of how you make farming work. You have a spouse with a W-2 job that gets you that health insurance. You focus on the farming. And then often one of you has another job. Maybe you drive Uber or Lyft. Maybe you do something else, some small business. You bake cakes. You do some consulting on the side. And so
Teaching.
teaching,
That's
right?
like,
And so the Minnesota Farmers Union, right after the rug got pulled out from under them, their members were not immediately, and look, they were worried about the soybeans, right? But their number one concern was, how on earth am I going to get health care? Is my kid going to get health care? Because for those of them that didn't have the spouse with the W-2 job, with the health insurance, they were buying them on the exchanges. And what, pray tell, was that supposedly completely prohibitive cost of those healthcare subsidies? $30 billion a year, $60 billion for a 2-year extension. How much did we spend? Again, the utter bare minimum on the Iran war, $29 billion. The slush fund is another $1 billion, 0.776. I got you a 1-year extension of the healthcare subsidies right there. How much have we just dumped into the oil and gas stocks? Just like literally take like the most direct transfer of wealth I've experienced in some time, by the way, because like everyone knows roughly how much their car gasses up at, right? I drive a 2013 Honda Padiddle, as you know. That my Honda Padiddle usually gasses up at the 87 or whatever for roughly think it's usually 45 or $50, a gallon. Now I'm paying $85. I'm paying $85 for a full tank of
For a
gas.
Civic?
I
What's the
don't drive a
tank?
Civic. I drive a Honda Accord.
Oh. Oh, Accord. I'm
All
sorry,
right.
sorry,
All right.
sorry.
Step
Okay,
off my
let's
ride,
let's
man.
say, hey,
Step
hey,
off my
okay.
ride.
So
All right.
what's that gas tank? Well, what is it in
16.
Maryland right now?
Oh,
Because I got to.
it's, I think it's like 539. Uh,
Jeez.
yeah, well, it's wild. It's wild out here. Now, yeah.
That's nuts. I mean, it's look, I mean, I think the $4 plus that we're paying in Iowa is absolutely absurd, but
No, and so literally all of our farmer friends could have the same healthcare subsidies they had up until last October, November, or whenever it was. But no, instead we decided to spend $29 billion on a dead end war. And
well, and
go
you've
ahead.
only been doing what it's cost so far, right? The
And I've only
war.
been using the Pentagon's estimate, right?
The
Like
estimate
you,
of what it has currently cost, but it's like each month that we are there,
yes,
that keeps going up. Do you
yes.
remember what we spent on the Iraq war?
It was
What,
$1.3
7
trillion dollars, or one.
1.3
Yeah,
trillion
that was the
was in.
estimate of
And
of
Iran
Iraq.
is a much, in case people don't know, like, look, Iran is the former Persian Empire, right? The Persian Empire, which extended to Greece all the way to the Indus Valley, right? That it was like,
The people
and
who invented chess. We
the
just went
people
to war with the
and
people who invented
astronomy,
chess.
right? Like astronomy, calculus,
Right.
was
Like,
uh
gonna go great, guys. Gonna go great.
well,
For
that's
no
the idea
reason.
that
For no
but Iran
reason.
is a much more formidable opponent than Iraq was. And Iraq cost us $1.3 trillion
Yeah.
to nation build there. So I have no idea what Americans think is going to happen with Iran. But we're looking at multipliers of that price tag.
So, Max, you had one last thing which we could have if we weren't
Well,
just, driving
you
around our little war wagons, all across the world and spending
you
it all
you
on
talked
bombs.
you talked about the price gouging of gasoline, and something that's been in the news frequently is the price gouging in grocery stores.
Hmm.
Um, Across this economy, we are seeing the effects of concentration plus supply shocks that come from, bad policy like the Iran war. But anytime that this is just a principle that all listeners should understand is that when costs go up for a corporation, they don't just pass the costs on to you just to like break even. They use it as an opportunity to raise the price further, right? So they still want to maintain a profit margin. And so if the cost has gone up $1 per unit or whatever, they want to make sure that they charge you a dollar
Mm,
30 more
right.
so that they can have a 30% profit off of that.
Right.
And so when we have supply shocks like the Iran war causing, it's causing corporations to charge you even more from that and have record profits as we keep seeing. It's always amazing. It's like everybody else is suffering, but corporations have the best year of their existence because of our pain. Um, there's an agency that you and I are both familiar with since we worked there, since you were ahead of the agency, and it's called the Federal Trade Commission. And the FTC is a beautiful organization created by um, you know, the progressive era of America, 1914, that the FTC Act was passed. But it focuses on two main areas, which is consumer protection and antitrust. And what we're seeing in American markets today, both of those area of enforcement are necessary for us to bring costs down for consumers. The last fiscal year, the FTC had a budget around $300 million, right? And with that, Alvaro, with that budget over the course, and I don't know because I think the 300 million was actually a dip from your last year. I can't
I
remember what the
believe it
budget was.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I
They
think it
give
was what
everyone a
was it? Yeah, they gave everyone a haircut, but so let's just even say like 350 million as like kind of a standard budget for the Federal Trade Commission. Like with that, we return money to consumers, or the FTC returns money to consumers through consumer protection actions, getting refund checks, to consumers. It provides actions like the Kroger Albertsons merger,
Right.
which I'll assert till the day I die has helped to keep grocery prices down.
Oh, absolutely.
If that merger had gone through, plus we had all these supply shock problems of the Iran war, I think Americans under the Kroger Albertson geographic umbrella would have been paying a hell of a lot more for their groceries than they even currently are. Because competition does force companies to, you know, keep their profit margins lower. Um, with that $1.776 billion dollar slush fund,
Yeah.
think about the increases think about the increases to the FTC's enforcement budget so that they could hire more attorneys, bring more cases. Because, we can't talk about the exact numbers here, but, that Kroger Albertsons case, um, I had the number up here, but, we don't the FTC has not disclosed what that case costs.
Right.
Um, but let's just say generally like tens of millions of dollars, right, to bring a case like that when you add up all of the expert fees, things like, but the states filed their attorney's
And that's just
fees.
a, out of the air estimate. This
It's
is not
it's just
any.
an out of, and it was
Yeah.
only based upon because there were states involved in it too.
Hmm.
And my gosh, I had it here, but it was in the order of, tens of millions of dollars that the states claimed in attorneys' fees,
Yeah.
and their costs for bringing the Kroger Albertsons merger.
Yeah.
So every increase to the budget of an agency like the FTC will help the government to go after corporate malfeasance, to go after concentration in these markets, um, in a way that will really help people.
Yeah.
There's a trickle down, not trickle down, right? But just economic multiplier effect
Yeah.
of a dollar. Because do you know the statistic? I know I had seen it before, but that for every dollar spent by the FTC, like returned, X number of dollars back to the American people.
I have,
Uh,
and I have a
I
good,
can't.
very concrete
Yeah,
example. So you said it was 300 million roughly for the last fiscal year. So I guess for the current fiscal year.
yeah. That was 2025, FY 2025.
So FY 2025, I think, ended in, I forget when the federal government's fiscal year ends. So I think it ends in like October maybe or September. I forget where it ends, but the FTC just settled
They
the
had
Amazon.
so their budget for FY 2026 is
Yeah.
383
All
million.
right.
So
So
they
hold that
increased it.
thought.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. We sued Amazon for basically tricking people into Prime subscriptions and then making it, and then literally creating something, I shit you not, called the Iliad Flow to basically prevent people from getting out of a Prime subscription that they did not want. And
And what is
this
the Iliad,
FTC, the
Alvaro? What
Iliad
is
would
the
be the Homeric epic, I believe, about the Battle of Troy. So this is that Brad Pitt and
the
what's his
Oh, well,
name,
better
Orlando
yet, we
Bloom
got
epic.
this summer, man, we have the Odyssey. Christopher Nolan is doing the
Yes,
Odyssey this summer,
separate
which
Homeric
is the home.
epic, separate Homeric epic.
Oh,
These
you're
are
right.
these
Oh,
are
is
two
that the
different
Iliad? Yeah,
things. Yeah, the
the
Iliad
Iliad is
and
the
but
Odyssey.
wait a second, is the Iliad by
The
I will
Iliad is
know.
Homer.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes. So the FTC settled this, and I think they probably could have gotten more for $2.5 billion, including $1.5 billion in refunds for consumers. And so just do that math real quick. This is an agency with a budget of a little over $300 million a year, putting 1.5 billion with a B dollars back into the pockets of consumers. So that's one heck of a multiplier.
Yeah.
Completely bananas math. And no, it's going to go to the little friends of this little president. So that's where we are.
Alvaro, do we have any good news
I do have
to
good
end
news. I
on?
got lots of good news.
Let's
So
let's
let
let's
me
talk
just,
because I'm depressed after that. The
yeah,
point being here, Americans should be angry.
yeah,
We should be angry about how our money is being stolen from us for
yeah,
self-dealing.
yeah,
We should be angry about endless wars that the government wastes money on. There are people that are really in need in this country,
yeah,
and we're never going to beat rivals like China by destroying our population,
yeah.
right? And that's every American needs to realize that we cannot compete on the world without having strong, educated populace that has their basic needs taken care of.
So I do have good news for
Good
people.
news.
Absolutely good news. So I attended my niece's graduation at
Oh,
App State down in Boone in North Carolina.
named
To
after my great, 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 great uncle.
Are you serious?
Daniel Boone is like part of my family tree.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So we were in Boone 2 weekends ago. So I've been watching these college graduations, and this amazing thing is happening, which is that the moment the graduation speaker mentions AI in any positive light, they are just drowned in boos because young people hate it. They see that it is being used as an excuse to take their jobs and make the people at the top of those companies richer. And so this is hopeful though, because I noticed something recently, Max, because our society is obsessed with looking at the United States Congress as the place where things are supposed to happen, at least. And so when it comes to AI, people are always, covering, oh, senator introduces a bill to regulate AI tonight at 8. When to date, Max, 0%, 0.00% of those bills to protect people against AI have passed the United States Congress. But I noticed
Gee,
something.
why?
But hold on, hold on. We get to good news, which is I took a step back and I started noticing that we actually do have some bright line rules against AI. We're not getting them from Congress. We're not getting them from lawyers filing lawsuits, at least not yet. We are actually getting them from collective bargaining by labor unions across the country. And so I took a moment to survey a bunch of the collective bargaining agreements won by a lot of the unions we work with. And it's amazing. If you are at the IATSE, which covers a lot of the engineers and electricians, the camera operators in the American entertainment industry, their agreement prevents them from being forced to take their work, put it into an AI in a way that displaces another person from their job. If you are a screen actor or a motion capture actor, in other words, for video games, they can't scan your body and put you in another film unless they tell you, you say okay, and they pay you. If you are a writer, your collective bargaining agreement prevents you from being handed a bunch of chat GPT AI slop and being told, hey, do a rewrite on this script that chat GPT wrote for me. If you are at the Communications Workers of America, if you are in a shop that they have organized and is under a collective bargaining agreement, chances are pretty strong you cannot get disciplined or fired by an AI. At the Culinary Workers Union, that is a huge presence in Nevada, if for any reason you are displaced from your job by new technology or AI, you get a minimum of a 6-month health benefits and pension. And if you're one of the hotel workers who just won a huge, huge contract in New York City in advance of the World Cup coming to town, anytime there's a new technology about to be introduced, that agreement forces your employer and your union to mandatorily bargain about it. We have bright line rules for AI in this country. They're not coming from Congress. They're not coming from lawyers filing lawsuits. They are coming from your local union. And so that for me is a bright spot. I wrote a whole essay about it. It's called The Workers Who Defy Gravity. And that is what brings me hope, because as long as we stare at Congress, I don't think we're going to win that much. I think we need to look at what's happening on the ground.
Alvaro, we'll go ahead and drop a link to that article in the notes of the show here.
That sounds
Um,
great.
can I give a piece of good news
Please.
that I so last week, Alvaro and I were in Memphis, Tennessee. Our buddy John Newman at the University of Memphis Law School organized a conference on labor and anti-monopoly, the labor movement. So um, I had such a good time connecting with folks at that conference.
Yeah.
But more than that, I had a great time exploring the city of Memphis. It actually happened that there was the international barbecue competition going on while we were there. I had some of the best soul food that I've had in a long time. And something that my wife Amanda and I saw while we were there is just how genuinely lovely people are
Mm,
in that city. And I don't know what it is about that city, but there's something kind of magical going on. It's
hmm.
not quite southern. It's got a lot of midwestern charm,
Huh.
like with the South kind of mixed into it. But I saw more genuine love between people, like hugs on the street, smiles. And it made me realize that as awful as kind of policy is in this country and how many problems that we're facing, real human connectivity is still here. And one of the things that Amanda and I did was we went to the National Civil Rights Museum, which is in Memphis, which I don't know if you all knew this. I didn't know it until we pulled up to the National Civil Rights Museum, but it's constructed around the Lorraine Hotel. And for people who don't know that term, it was the hotel that Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King, was assassinated. On the balcony, he had stepped outside of his room, and was assassinated. And we happened to go on a day that they were opening up a new wing called the Legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And so we went through the whole history of the civil rights movement. That was the first part of the museum. And that alone made Amanda and me realize that the struggles, she's in education,
Hmm.
I'm in antitrust law, fighting against corporate power.
Hmm.
You know, the struggles of this country have always been hard, right? And when I think about what people endured in the civil rights movement, protesting, getting beaten by police, getting beaten by their white neighbors, right? Just simply for trying to assert civil rights in this country. There were videos I cried a number of times in it just because some of the videos were devastating, like the sit-ins, the counter sit-ins, like people being dragged out of the seat and beaten, right? And practicing nonviolence, in response. They had mugshots, along the wall of every single like civil rights. And the beautiful thing of that was it wasn't just black protesters, right? There was tons of white protesters
Yeah.
who were arrested, protesting against the abuses, not only in the South, but in major cities across the country. And the legacy was a very interesting experience because it was the first day that it was open when Amanda and I went, and there was a beautiful party that was happening
Hmm.
celebrating the opening of this.
You did
But
this right. I didn't catch all this stuff going on in the background.
no, and but the legacy talks about King's like what he was doing at the time that he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. And it makes me realize just how important this struggle is, fighting for economic populism
Yeah.
in this country, because he was shifting his focus away from, racial civil rights to economic rights.
Yeah.
And the summer after he was assassinated, he was organizing a protest in Washington, D.C., which was called the Poor People's March, right? And his idea was actually this is not just a African American issue, right? It's not a Black American issue, poverty. Poverty is a white issue too, and we need to join together and fight against this structural economic, um, system that keeps people down.
Hmm.
And so all of that gave me a lot of hope for the future.
Amen.
It gave me some energy to keep on fighting, because nothing in this country ever changes for the good without people making sacrifices, without people standing up and fighting against oppression.
Amen. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening. I think that's a powerful note to end on, Max. Please, if you are with us, take a moment to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and Spotify or Apple, wherever you get these podcasts. Uh,
Facebook. I didn't know this. I want to go live on Facebook, but I found out
so
yesterday
our
that we
friends from
don't
high
have.
school can watch. Yes, we don't
I
have enough
know. Well, it's
followers.
just like,
Yes,
I mean, there is a certain demographic that's on Facebook, and
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
want it, but it's like we need to get to 100 followers on Facebook to go live on there. So please, if you have not followed our Facebook page, please just subscribe on there, because once we get to 100, I can then start broadcasting these through the Facebook app.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you all, folks, for watching. We will see you soon. We've got a couple great episodes brewing up. You will get them soon. Have a great weekend. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, folks. Enjoy, relax, and we'll see you soon.